And with that, I am now going to turn over to our next panel. But before we do, the speakers in this session were several of our winners in the top 20, but we do have a few others who we've invited to engage in the panel. And that includes JetBlue, Sherwin-Williams, the John Deere Company, and IKEA. And they will be represented in the next two panels. So I'd like to turn it over to Kara Smith, who is a Gabelli Fellow here at Fordham University and is also the Global Managing Director at Accenture in Sustainable Retail. Kara?
Great. Thank you so much, Letson. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, very pleased to be at Fordham University and the founder of the Responsible Business Coalition, which is an incubator for collective action at the Gabelli School of Business. So we are convening industry CEOs and thought leaders to develop actionable, scalable, values-based business solutions. And that allows us to address the key environmental, social, and governance issues of our time. So you can imagine how thrilled and very happy we are to be here today, celebrating all of the wonderful work that is being done. Particularly excited about today's topic, which is the pandemic's impact on company innovativeness and lessons learned, and really looking forward to the conversation with our panelists from IKEA, JetBlue, and Sherwin-Williams, and want to thank them for joining us today. So just before we kick off, I would like to share some data from the 2020 American Innovation Index study conducted by Fordham and Rockbridge that is informing the conference today. And I'm just going to share a screen. Okay, so I hope that everybody can see that. Is that okay? So what we're looking at here is consumers were asked about companies' response during the global pandemic and how well it met their expectations. So what we're looking at here on this graphic is the difference between companies, customers who felt companies met their expectations or exceeded their expectations, and those who felt their expectations were perhaps falling short. In particular, highlighted here are industries like financial services, insurance, automotive, quick serve, and grocery, which responded quite well during the pandemic in the eyes of the consumers. Particularly those that were able to transform their businesses during the pandemic were rewarded on the American Innovation Index, and we all will expect that they will be ultimately rewarded as well with loyalty from their customers. So in the COVID-specific survey, USAA, AMI, and Ford took the top 3 spots for their response. And now we're going to come back to the panel on the pandemic's impact on company innovativeness and the lessons learned. Okay. So very happy to welcome our panelists, as we've said, and really excited just to talk with them about the different things that we've learned during this time. It's been really fantastic to see that IKEA, JetBlue, and Sherwin-Williams are actually all in the top 20 of the American Innovation Index, which is across more than 20 industries and over 200 global brands. So super exciting, and congratulations to you all. I confess that I'm a bit of a responsible business nerd, if you will, and I noticed a bit of the theme when learning about our panelists and their companies. And there were kind of 2 common threads that we're going to highlight a bit as we go through that emerged. And one is their focus on the customer and how customers are at the heart of everything they're doing to innovate. And also their innovation for good. So they are keeping environmental, social, and governance squarely in mind. And delighted to be here today with Sarah Bognan, Manager of Sustainability and ESG at JetBlue. Thank you, Sarah, for being with us. Also with Selwyn Crittenden, Business Development Manager at IKEA. And Steve Revnew, who is the Senior VP of Marketing Product Innovation at Sherwin-Williams. And we all had a chance to connect the other day, and we're talking a bit about how the tragedy of the pandemic has changed us. We've been left with compassionate consumers that are more concerned for their health of others. I think we've all recognized we're an interconnected community. And now the consumers are really expecting it, and it is considered to be kind of table stakes for brands to provide products and services with people and planet in mind. So I'm really looking forward to untangling the innovations that are underway and the ways that the companies were able to pivot and react on the horizon. And I'm going to jump into questions and start with Steve. So Steve, if you would be so kind, would you quickly introduce yourself and your role at Sherwin-Williams and talk a bit about how the pandemic impacted your business and your customers, if you would be so kind?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, thank you to Fordham and thank you to the Cabela School of Business for this honor and this opportunity to speak here. I'm Steve Revenue, Senior Vice President, Marketing Product Innovation with the Sherwin-Williams Company. For those of you that don't know who Sherwin-Williams is, we are a global producer of paints and coatings that protect and beautify everything from your buildings to aircrafts to ships to military vehicles to some things you won't even think of, guitars, golf balls, on and on. So very broad spectrum in regards to what we do. As far as the pandemic and kind of the things that we shifted towards, I would tell you that, you know, as more and more consumers nested, what we found was we had to pivot to the point of having more curbside service available to our customers. And in the same token, we had to pivot to making our colors available. You can certainly see them online, but actually being able to physically get them. So we very quickly pivoted to having online color ordering so that consumers could go online, order the colors, have them shipped to their homes, and then fundamentally choose the color that they wanted to, so they could then go back online, order the product, and then pick it up on a curbside service.
It's really interesting, this idea of people being stuck at home. I think you said to me the other day they were at home dreaming up projects, which is quite interesting. So then to have all of the people serviced as we're all living and working at home and innovating, I think, in our own spaces as it becomes a place of multi-use is fantastic. I'm going to actually fold in Selwyn because I think that you've had many of the same issues and opportunities, let's say. So just thinking as well, Selwyn, if you two would introduce yourself. I know you also have a lot of customers at home that are dreaming up projects, thinking about how they can be working at home or how they can be creating also opportunities for their students, their children, and maybe themselves to study at home. Would you talk a bit also about how the pandemic has driven IKEA to innovate and maybe serve those customers in a little bit of a different way?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the Fordham University and the Cabela School of Business for having us and joining today. So my name is Selwyn Crittenden. I'm the Business Development and Transformation Manager for IKEA US. I look after innovation and co-creation, sustainability, our project management office, and expansion. So a few small areas that we look after. And then to answer your question, I think to Steve's point, there was a lot of things happening even prior to the pandemic. You know, this really accelerated our transformational awareness and what do we need to do. So we started to really talk about how do we optimize and evolve our e-commerce business. So hopefully you all have seen the newly revamped and inspiring IKEA.com website. And then we also quickly pivoted to converting our stores into fulfillment areas. So taking our traditional blue and yellow boxes that you've seen across the country and allowing those stores to also support the e-commerce flow. So then we've introduced a higher level of click and collect service and click and deliver service. And what we see is that we've been actually able to introduce new contactless services, whether it be for ordering goods or payment in our locations moving forward. And then we've also been expanding our remote planning services. So for those that have had dreams of a new closet or a new kitchen, we've had the opportunity for customers to interact with us even when you weren't able to join us in the stores. Lastly, it was very important when the stores closed this spring that we continue to find new ways. So a drive up curbside service and other innovations like how do we leverage data and insights quickly to make sure that we take smart decisions and smart actions in a much more expeditious role. And then last but not least, really the different types of formats. So as we look into the future, how are the different types of formats or customer meeting points will evolve to make sure that how our customers want to shop, we can deliver that service to them in a really good way.
I want to ask a follow-up question, because the other day when we were on the phone, you mentioned that you've been able to focus some support on communities where IKEA is serving. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think it's more important that we not only sell fabulous home furnishings and furniture, but I think it's also super important that every IKEA unit also acts as a ambassador for the community. So we've been able to utilize some of our locations to support this during the COVID period. So our location in Costa Mesa recently held a food drive, a food bank drive, where they allowed, the store was closed, but everyone participated and supported different companies to allowing people to have food. Hunger during this period of time is super important. So we can utilize some of our locations to really support the community, but also take into specific causes. So we can actually turn around some of our funds and really support the communities where we serve.
Yes, terrific. I want to bring Sarah into the conversation. And Sarah, you've had obviously a bit of a different experience during the pandemic. So we're talking a little bit about nesting, and then wondering how maybe you've been looking and utilizing this quieter time with maybe folks not traveling as much. As we were nesting, we were certainly not flying around. And I think there's some pent up demand for all of us to be able to go and visit loved ones, and know that we're hoping that will be quickly on the horizon. So would you just also talk about a bit about what you've been doing in this time period?
Of course, yes. Thank you, Kara, and thank you to Fordham University for inviting JetBlue onto this panel. So again, I am Sarah Bogdan. I currently lead the Sustainability and ESG program for JetBlue. We're obviously an airline. Hopefully you know that, headquartered in New York City, so not too far from Fordham. So we're based over in Long Island City and actually operating out of our offices, as obviously we're an in-person and travel company. And just by way of introduction, I consider sort of my job to be really two parts from the sustainability and ESG perspective. Broadly from the ESG, my job is to identify emerging environmental and social trends and risks and sort of relay them into the company. And from the sustainability side, really to operationalize how we respond to the environmental risks and do lots of fun things like roll out electric vehicles, introduce sustainable aviation fuel, have more fuel efficient aircraft, etc. So yes, Kara, as you mentioned, this is unprecedented is everyone's favorite word this year, but truly been a very unique time to be working at an airline. I will say that obviously our industry is one that's based on innovation. I mean, like when you take a step back and realize this metal tube is flying through the air, it's mind-boggling. And so fortunately, that lends itself to, we're always thinking of how do we do things next and better. And especially for JetBlue, we're a fairly young airline, just celebrated our 20th birthday this year. So it allows us sort of to be nimble and to adapt, and we've always existed to provide a different experience. I will say that the first few months, maybe in the March kind of quarantine lockdown phase, it was just me running around just trying to get a handle of what was going on, and the sky seemed to be falling. But pretty quickly we shifted into probably around the summertime. I think we really felt this from our leadership, like, guys, we're going to recover from this. People love to travel. We will get through this. JetBlue will be here. The industry will be here. As you said, the demand will return. So how do we use this opportunity to build back smarter? And we saw some really cool stuff. Some things not related to sustainability, such as, I think on one day we announced like 24 new routes that we were flying suddenly, which is like, it's typically one announcement is like, we have a new route or a new airport that we're flying to, and that's exciting for a few months. But, the rapid changes to a lot of everybody's flight schedules, where they're flying, including for us. And I think that same thought applied to sustainability and ESG. So what are these new opportunities that have arisen, as we have this quieter time, as you said, and then also how do we refocus on these external risks? And I think I'll touch on this more in a future question, but truly this year has just been a painful demonstration of how impactful external risks can be to a business. Even when we're doing all the right things, from my perspective, something can come in, much like climate change. And so it's when we emerge from this, how do we make sure that we're mitigating all of these other risks as best as we can?
Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. We know a lot of people now are talking about scenario modeling, how do we think about all of what might happen and have the fastest and most amount of relevant data as possible. So it's coming on as quite a fascinating conversation. One of the things too that we were talking a little bit about, and I think Selwyn just mentioned too, was this idea of accelerating innovation. And Steve, I know that you are a chemist by trade and also an innovator. And it's kind of fascinating to think that paint and home can actually drive health and wellness and even maybe be more environmentally friendly in the past. Might you share a bit about how paint can kill germs?
Sure. I think it's really as part of, to your point, really health and wellness and really looking at, you know, how could we take paint and coatings beyond just beautify and protects and make them more functional in nature. We have launched really new products that provide sanitizing technology, which, you know, keeps the walls sanitized for 24/7, if you will, and really helps prevent that spread of bacteria on the surfaces. So what they do is they'll kill 99.9% of bacteria such as staph, VRE, Enterobacter, and MRSA right on the surface within 2 hours of exposure, and then they continue to kill at a rate of 90% even after repeated exposure. So you know, from a health and wellness standpoint, especially, you know, when you think about the pandemic and everything, and just overall, you know, the focus on cleanability. In the same token, when you think about, you know, how much time you've spent indoors and in the past, and certainly now, as a result of the pandemic, even spending more time indoors, we have a technology, which is an air purifying technology that was really designed and developed to help keep indoor air quality better. It actually reduces formaldehyde, which is present in a lot of environments. And another added benefit with that technology is it also has helps reduce common household odors as well. So, you know, to your point, when you're talking about products for health and well-being, these are both new technologies that we brought to the market, you know, that really provide these functional benefits.
Do you think, Steve, I'm wondering, because it's making me feel like I have to repaint my house, you know, with the pandemic as well. But is this something that you're finding both for industrial use and for personal use, you know, or do you see both different groups, businesses, as well as the end consumer looking at this as an important phase for the future?
Yeah, we've actually seen both types of customers utilizing these. So if you think about any type of commercial structure or building where you have a lot of occupants, great solutions for that, as well as a great solution for the indoor of your home, because, you know, both of them are going to provide you with those benefits no matter what building you're in.
Yeah.
I think, you know, one of the other things I'll say too, as well as just from a color standpoint, you know, if you think about health and wellness and really those colors that help promote well-being, we do also have a color palette that was put together as to help promote better well-being as well, and those are certainly carrying both structure in the home as well as in commercial settings as well.
Interesting. My whole house is painted white, so I guess I'm probably in trouble that I don't have enough wellness and color here. Interesting, you know, thinking about chemistry and innovation too. Selwyn, I want to just talk, you were mentioning a little bit about at the beginning, at the top of the panel, that you were using technology. And I know that IKEA has a big focus on being climate positive and using regenerative sources and so on. And I think one of the big things that we're all seeing here is that we need transformational ecosystems, which I think is a lot packed into 2 words, but this idea of each different company having a skill set which is relevant and maybe necessary to the other, and what is the sharing that has to happen there. I know that you've got an interesting focus with technology partners and some new ecosystems as well to serve customers and sustainability. So maybe you'll jump in and talk a little bit how that might manifest now and also in the future at IKEA.
Very, very, very true. And thank you. I think one key partnership for us is our partnership with Optoro, really looking at reverse logistics, because as we continue to grow and our e-commerce channel continues to build, there's going to be need for all retailers to really look at the reverse flow of goods in terms of returns. So what do you do with these goods? How do you work with these goods to make sure that when there is a sustainable way of working with them, how can we disposition them to the best channel? How can we work with returns to get them back to stock for others to use? And it gives you a platform. So if you think in the future, how do we take those goods and instead of them going to the landfill, how can you find other opportunities like the work we're doing currently with Optoro and Goodwill in New York, finding new homes for products and or the building blocks for the future? How can we look at furniture as a service? So could we see these goods coming back in a circular fashion to other people that may not be able to afford brand new goods, but give life to very good home furnishings and give someone else a chance to really live a life with better and more affordable furnishings in their home?
I imagine untangling reverse logistics and how to move that from homes that it's in into other homes is going to be quite a challenge. Do you have anything more that you could say about how you might be looking at that in the future?
I think it's a smart approach. And what we're trying to do is really build the building blocks here. So really revolutionizing how we accept returns with customers, get the customer involved, make sure that they have a choice of how they want to get goods back to the company, to IKEA. But also, how do we also offset the number of trucks on the road to make sure that we can reduce CO2 emissions by giving the best dispositioning channel for those customers? So for all of us, how can we reduce times in the store waiting and getting more inspired by the home furnishing inspiration that you see through our units? Give them the choice of using whichever media they would like to shop with us. You know, we have to take the barriers away that prevent customers from shopping with retailers in the future. And Optoro is a good opportunity for us to really expand that, build the base, and then unleash new opportunities in the future for circularity and climate.
Fantastic, fantastic. Sarah, so we talked a little bit about starting to dream of the future when we can leave our spaces and visit loved ones and travel for vacation. And I would like to be on a beach, if I'm honest, sometime again and doing something chic in some faraway land and exploring a place. We will, I hope so. Yes, I hope so. So one of the things that we've heard a bit about is we're talking about how do we build back better? How do we reset in a different way? How will we all be thinking in the future and maybe reconsider things we've done in the past? And you mentioned to me the other day that some folks are talking about flight shaming because we should all be obviously very conscious of greenhouse gas emissions and our own carbon footprint and so on. So as we're all looking to make kind of different, mindful, conscious choices in the future, I'm wondering what you feel about that when it comes to the beach that I want to go to.
Of course, the beach will still be there. The flight shaming movement is very interesting, and it's something you probably haven't heard those words in a little bit. It was definitely, for those not familiar, you probably were, but it was the concept of you know, making passengers feel shame for choosing to fly rather than taking alternative forms of travel, or not traveling at all. It was definitely bigger in Europe, but we were certainly seeing, you know, parts of that dialogue here. And I really don't. I actually thought it was great that this was becoming a larger narrative, that people were thinking about the environmental impact of their travel. Ultimately, I do think that's great. The thing, though, is I of course, you know, focusing on aviation sustainability, I would argue the solution is not in not traveling. I think that this has, as you said, been a very tough year, and this is not assuming when we do emerge from the crisis that is the global pandemic and it is safe to travel, or folks feel more comfortable doing that, people aren't going to choose to stay home forever. You know, people want to travel, people love to travel. Some people need to travel for work or to see family. And so through that, I don't think it's a smart approach to say, let's just shame those who choose to travel and never travel again. No. So how do we address that in a real way? And so for JetBlue, we completely understood that. And in 2019, when this narrative was a little louder, I'm lucky that our leaders are so cool here at JetBlue and so with it, that they were like, okay, let's do something big, because we completely agree. We again share that sentiment that travel is good, but nobody wants the emissions either. We don't want the emissions that come with air travel. And so we decided to make a really big move. And so in January of this year, we announced our intention to be the first carbon neutral airline for domestic travel, so all of our domestic flights today, by offsetting, again, all of our emissions from our flights for our domestic network. So that was pretty cool. So we announced that was planned for July 1st. There's another part of the announcement was that also we would start flying regularly on SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel. This is a drop-in renewable-based jet fuel. No changes in performance or safety, of course. It is well proven. You've probably already flown on a blend of SAF at some point and didn't even realize. But the cool thing is that it reduces emissions by up to 80% per gallon. So it's like this perfect solution in terms of quickly and significantly addressing emissions. And so that was the other part of the announcement, that we would start flying on SAF out of San Francisco International Airport, also starting July 1st. And again, it was really important these two announcements came together, because while carbon offsetting is what we have to rely on today to get to carbon neutrality, that is not the long-term plan. We fully see that offsets are a bridge as we build up lower carbon technology, such as sustainable aviation fuel, such as we have more efficient airspace, increasingly more efficient aircraft coming in. I could talk about that for hours. Instead, feel free to look at our website for more and more details on that. And I do want to say we did meet our commitment. And that was an interesting exercise to make the announcement in January, by February, March, have everything change, and for our leaders to say, of course, we're still doing it. And we delivered on time. And so I'm really excited that right now, for those who do choose to travel, JetBlue picks up the tab to offset all of the emissions for domestic travel. And again, if you're flying out of SFO, you're flying on a sustainable aviation fuel blend. So I'll pause there, but I think at the end of the day, we kept it going. I think it shows our commitment to really the narrative that we're saying, and that we're just, again, trying to manage a really critical risk as people are concerned about environmental impact of travel. And so when we do come back, we have this wonderful, sustainable solution for you.
Fantastic. It's interesting, just before we don't have so much time, and just before we come into the lightning round, I think this question, I'm going to put my consumer hat on for a second. So I am trying the best I can to do it perfectly. I think that's difficult. I think it's difficult even for all of the companies. We all need more information. But are you all seeing a consumer focus on it? Do you think people are more mindful? Are they asking for these products? I wonder if you each could make a little bit of a comment on that before we close with the lightning round. Steve, you want to?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Consumers are absolutely asking for them. Consumers are absolutely looking for companies that really are more sustainable in everything they do. So it's about not just the chemistry in the product, but it's about the entire value chain and all the opportunities there in regards to, the transportation of the goods and services, as well as, overall social responsibility in the markets that you serve, and being part of the community. And that certainly is something that at Sherwin-Williams we look to do in everything we do, no matter where we're at. So it's really, you have to look at the entire value chain to be really a environmentally responsible company.
Yeah. Selwyn, you want to weigh in, Sarah, either?
I totally can echo what Steve was just saying. I think the consumers are more educated around their choices, and they will make the best decision for themselves based on how companies either act or don't act. So It is super important that we all take a stand, and whether it be aggressive goals like we have for 2030 at IKEA, or individual goals that you have where all your representative companies, really consumers are very smart, and they're looking for solutions and or products that really embody how they want to live. And that's what we're trying to do, to make sure that not only do we make great products that are sustainable, but we also communicate the benefits of using some of our products. So it goes hand in hand. Consumers are very smart.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. It's a funny time, and I think we can maybe foresee finally a change in human behavior. It's not always convenient to make the right choice, but I think more and more folks are realizing how important it is for themselves, for the planet. Again, this kind of interconnectedness of the community that we live in. So really nice to see. Sarah, anything to add there?
I agree. I haven't seen a ton of our our customers recently. But I think they already had strong focus on, the environmental impact, particularly of airlines. I do think though that for those who are traveling, you have this very high degree of, you want responsible travel, mostly from, environmental health and safety perspective, but I do think that extends to other elements such as the emissions associated with your travel. And you also saw these stories, during the lockdown phase time of how, clean the air and the waterways were, and apparently dolphins were flying through the Venice canals, or whether or not this is true. I think it did put a spotlight on, when we do return, we have to find a different way, because, I think it sort of highlighted potential impact from the travel industry.
Yeah, you actually take us to our last round before we close up, which is a bit of a lightning round. So I always like to land on a hopeful idea of the future, since we're all doing this work and working through the evolutions and this kind of responsible business reset. So just would love if you would all weigh in and offer a brief comment or sentence on what you love about the power of innovation to drive a kinder, gentler, greener, cleaner, more hopeful future. So we can just go right down the row and leave the conference with this idea of what innovation can do to drive the change that we're all looking for.
I can open up certainly and just say, I think the power of innovation really just is, provides us with the opportunity to look at doing things differently, but better. And I think it's really those deep insights from, customers, as well as, those unarticulated needs that are in the marketplace that really drive us for innovation and provide differentiation and value and solutions to our customers.
Fantastic.
I would just say innovation is the fuel for us all to reach our dreams and passion. And so this is the time now where we start to listen, we start to learn, we act faster, but we can produce better results now by listening, by learning. But this really is the fuel to make the future happen for all of us here today. So that is what I say.
Fantastic, fantastic. Sarah, we'll leave you the last word.
Oh, good. I love that, both your responses. Since I know we have a number of students in the audience, I'll speak to when I started at JetBlue, something that my boss told me, and I was an intern back in grad school. I remember I kept asking her, like, how did this program start? And how did this one start? And every time she just said, I don't know, I thought of it. And so that's something I think of now, is it's simply just, innovation comes from simply recognizing a problem and responding to it and just doing the work to make these things happen. And it's kind of incredible when we have these big headlines coming out of these big companies, but often it's just people pushing things through.
Fantastic. So I'm happy to say that a question came in from the audience, which was asking, do you all actively pursue innovation, or is it a happy side effect? So I'm thrilled that you've all made it clear that it's something that you are all pursuing, and it's sort of critical and central to the core and DNA of what you're doing. So heartfelt thanks to the three of you for being with us, for all of your insights. It's been a pleasure to spend some time together, and I appreciate the very hopeful end. So look forward to crossing paths with you again in the future.